Critical race theory has exploded into the public dialogue, with everything from top news organizations to educational curriculums to angry parents and teachers debating their school boards over whether it should be taught to their kids.
From the political arena,
critical race theory is bigoted, it is a lie, and it is every bit as racist as the Klansmen in white sheets.
To school board meetings, the battle over critical race theory continues to heat up.
The Western culture and values that brought forth Christianity in the founding documents are being called evil and racist.
I'm reminded of the tyranny of communist China, where your money is legally stolen and then used in government schools to indoctrinate children against their parents.
As long as you Marxists push your unconstitutional agenda on my child, she will not be returning back to Loudoun County schools.
Her child's not going to go back.
CRT is not an honest dialogue. It is a tactic that was used by Hitler and the Ku Klux Klan on slavery very many years ago to dumb down my ancestors so we could not think for ourselves. CRT is racist. It is abusive. It discriminates against one's color.
What you're doing is you're playing a series of word games. You know that critical whiteness studies is a subfield of critical race theory?
No, it's not.
These things are all deeply interrelated.
No, they're not.
And I'm not going to let you play word games. And this is really, I think, the most essential thing.
Hold on. No.
Let me respond at least once. I haven't gotten a full sentence out.
Because
Walker, please. Walk. No! Hey, John, please don't resist. You guys don't resist. This is wow, shame. You need to be arrested! Shame on you! This is our house! I am disgusted.
As I said, it's extremely contentious. But the truth is, very few people actually know what critical race theory is. It's constantly being misrepresented in the news media and in public discourse by people who are either intentionally or unintentionally distorting what it is and where it came from.
Critical race theory is not being taught in schools. Can it influence the way that some teachers teach? Yeah, but that's a good thing, right? Because race and racism is literally the building blocks of this country. So how can you not talk about it? And so I think teaching it this way actually does the opposite of what these people say it does.
are you teaching children to hate America?
No, I'm teaching children to question America. And that's what makes a good patriot.
I decided to create a YouTube series where I slowly and methodically go through the book, Critical Race Theory and Introduction, in order to come to a deeper and more nuanced understanding of the idea and its social implications. A little about the book, Critical Race Theory and Introduction, was written by Richard Delgado and Gene Stefancic, two well-known and avowed critical race theorists who are attempting to present the ideological framework in both an honest and positive light. The authors make many statements, assertions, and claims about the nature of racism, individuality, and history, especially the history of the United States. In each video, we will be going through these claims and evaluating them on their merits, their correspondence with the truth, and whether the evidence backs up these claims or disproves them. So without further ado, let us begin. Chapter 1, Introduction. Think of events that can occur in an ordinary day. A child raises her hand repeatedly in a 4th grade class. The teacher either recognizes her or does not. A shopper hands a cashier a $5 bill to pay for a small item. The clerk either smiles, makes small talk, and deposits change in the shopper's hand, or does not. The writers seem to be presenting us, the readers, with a thought experiment containing the mundane social experiences of everyday life. Nothing too controversial here. So far, so good. You are a white person, the child, the shopper, the jogger. The responses are all from white people and are all negative. Are you annoyed? Do you for even a moment think that maybe you are receiving this treatment because of your race? Or might you think that all these people are having a bad day? This is where the thought experiment starts to get interesting. The writers seem to want us, the readers, to imagine ourselves in the mind of a white person who is being treated badly by strangers in the course of everyday life. They ask us, would you ever assume that your being treated unfairly was as the result of your skin color? This is an interesting thought experiment because the answer is completely subjective. Certainly, there are white people who would assume a negative social experience was as a result of their skin color, and we probably all know people like that. But for the sake of argument, we'll accept the two authors' implication that a white person would never assume they were being treated cruelly or unfairly on the basis of race. Next, they want us to imagine a different scenario, one in which we conceive ourselves being treated badly as people of color. You are a person of color, and these same things happen to you, and the actors are all white. What is the first thing that comes to your mind? Do you immediately think that you might be treated in these ways because you are not white? Here the writers flip the script and ask the reader to assume that they are instead a black person and were being treated unfairly by white strangers in the course of their everyday life. The implication they seem to want us to take away from this is that as a black person, you would automatically assume that race had something to do with your unfair treatment, which seems to be the entire point of this thought experiment. But once again, the authors are generalizing, as there are many black people who would not automatically envision the worst case scenario and assume that every bad experience with a white person must be due to racism.
Where are we in the United States of America in race relations and what you see from day to day in your life?
Skip, they wouldn't want to ask me that. They wouldn't want my answer to represent it because God knows I have been nothing but blessed. My whole path, these 33 years have been nothing but a blessing. I have never, never is a strong word, I've never dealt with racism, and I'm glad I didn't have to. And I don't know if it's because of my blessings, I don't know if it's, but it is my reality. So I would have to say, not only did I thought it was over, I still believe it's over. But I open my eyes and I see everybody. I don't have this type of crowd or that type of crowd. My crowd has always been everybody, thank God. And that's all I can answer for. It also is the person that I am. I believe strongly that it's the person that I am.
You treat people a certain way.
Exactly.
Were you the premise that she had there, that you would be fighting racism the entire time, going up through your career. Mm-hmm. Did you see it the entire time? Or when you walk into Sirius XM, are they throwing stuff at you?
Everybody has different experiences. And my belief system is part of our experiences are how we interact with the world. Because once you remove the veil by how you act, people may have a moment, but they tend to come over to your side. So I didn't see are there racists in the world? Yeah. Did somebody have a bias against me? You know what? I don't care, because I'm not going to let it stop me. If I can't go through you, I'm going to go around you. And that's my approach to it. And that's how my parents raised me. They said, find a path, work your way through it, and just do what you can to the best of your ability. And if you have to readjust, hey, that's life.
So what both David Webb and Lil Wayne have touched on here, in their own way, is a profound truth about the nature of social interaction and the way that human beings respond to one another. Psychology has proven, using countless multivariate studies, that up to 93% of our communication is nonverbal. This means that only a fraction of what you as an individual say affects how other people respond to you. Much more impactful on the ways others perceive and treat you comes from your body language, your tonality, your facial expressions, and too many other nonverbal features to list. However, most of our nonverbal cues come from our subconscious belief systems, attitudes, and ideas about how the world works. This is a profound point, because it means that the way the external world interacts with us is primarily based not on our conscious decisions, but on the beliefs, messages, and attitudes we have deeply internalized throughout our lives. When Lil Wayne made the claim that racism doesn't exist in his reality, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He has structured his reality in such a way that he doesn't read racism into other people's behaviors, and because of his colorblind attitude, according to him, people treat him well. So let's move on to the next page. Do you immediately think that you might be treated in these ways because you are not white? If so, how do you feel? Angry, downcast, do you let it roll off your back? Sometimes actions like these are mere rudeness or indifference. The merchant is in a hurry, the walker lost in thought, but at other times race seems to play a part. Now I want to pause here because I think this is an important moment in this thought experiment. The authors seem to admit that there could be many different explanations which would explain people's bad or unfair behavior which have nothing to do with racism. This is extremely relevant because, again, reading racism into every negative social interaction as an automatic response to bad experiences would definitely play into your own internalized beliefs about reality and the nonverbal cues you subconsciously send to other people in your daily life. Perhaps here you are thinking that I've strawmanned critical race theory, because the authors, thinkers, and philosophers behind it are not making the argument that we should assume that racism is present in every social interaction and facet of our common everyday life. But unfortunately, you would be wrong. Only a few pages later, in a section titled The Basic Tenets of Critical Race Theory, the authors write, Basic Tenets of Critical Race Theory. What do critical race theorists believe? First, that racism is ordinary, not aberrational. Normal science, the way usual society does business, the common everyday experience of most people of color in this country. A few pages after that, it poses this question. Is critical race theory pessimistic? Consider that it holds that racism is ordinary, normal, and embedded in society, and moreover that changes in relationships among the races reflect the interest of the dominant groups rather than idealism, altruism, or the rule of law.
And the kind of questions we ask about race and racism from an anti-racist frame are very different than the kinds of questions we would ask from a dominant or mainstream frame. For example, dominant frame is, was that racism? You know, and usually there's a vigorous denial, right? A pros and a con. Was that racism? From an anti-racist frame, the question is not was it, the question is how was it? It's always at play. It's in every situation, every dynamic. You can never really say regardless of race, or race had nothing to do with it, right? That's not really possible to remove it.
I sort of joke about how it was the most liberating thing that ever happened to me and also the most frustrating for everyone around me. Because like when you start learning about systems, everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out to everyone all the time. So there's a good year of my life.
In Cynical Theories, a book which examines critical race theory and its philosophical roots, authors Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay write, Critical race theory and intersectionality are centrally concerned with ending racism through the unlikely means of making everyone more aware of race at all times and places. They proceed upon an assumption that racism is normal and permanent, and the problem is primarily that people, particularly white people, are failing to see, acknowledge, and address it. The question is not, did racism take place? For that is to be assumed, but rather, how did racism manifest in that situation? That is, we are to assume that racism is always taking place, and our job is to examine situations for evidence for it. Critical race theory's hallmark paranoid mindset, which assumes racism is everywhere, always just waiting to be found, is extremely unlikely to be helpful or healthy for those who adopt it. Always believing that one will be or is being discriminated against, and trying to find out how, is unlikely to improve the outcome of any situation. It can also be self-defeating. In The Coddling of the American Mind, attorney Greg Lukianoff and social psychologist Jonathan Haidt describe this process as a kind of reverse cognitive behavioral therapy, which makes its participants less mentally and emotionally healthy than before. The main purpose of CBT is to train oneself not to catastrophize and interpret every situation in the most negative light, and the goal is to develop a more positive and resilient attitude towards the world so that one can engage with it as fully as possible. If we train young people to read insult, hostility, and prejudice into every interaction, they may increasingly see the world as hostile to them and fail to thrive within it. We will go further into the concepts of microaggressions and the assumptions which critical race theorists believe leads to a cultural heritage of racism present in every American system and institution in the next video. But for now, thank you for watching, and I hope that this examination of the first few paragraphs of Critical Race Theory and Introduction has been illuminating.